sometimes words aren't enough, right? Some emotions cannot be expressed. So with art, it's like it doesn't have these physical constraints. It's like different mediums, different materials, and it opens up these different areas that the subconscious, you're like, oh, wait, I didn't even realize.
So, why do you think some emotions refuse to be put into words and are easier to put onto a paper or canvas?
If you're just moving your hand with a paintbrush or a pen, and sometimes that allows you to kind of gain control.
Have you seen that certain colors or shapes repeatedly pop up when people are trying to explain grief or trauma?
She gravitated towards the red and blue, and she started creating, just doodling random stuff. And she looked at her art and she was just like, this looks like the rhythm of a heartbeat.
Tanvi Mehta is an art therapist, mental health advocate, and the social justice chair for the New York Art Therapy Association, NYATA. With a master's in art therapy from New York University and a practice grounded in cultural sensitivity and emotional access, she's worked across continents, supporting children, survivors of gender-based violence, and adults dealing with complex mental health conditions.
Hi, we're speaking to Tanvi Mehta today, an art enthusiast, an art therapist. And this is a really, really unique format for us because we're doing this online. She's in New York, and I think it's beyond midnight for her. And we're trying to put this together for our guests to understand a different type of therapy, a different conversation, which I hope is intriguing and engaging for everyone who's listening to us. So, hi Tanvi. Tell me, what is
Hi.
art therapy? What does it entail? And how does it get integrated into mental health?
Yeah, so art therapy, any guesses on what you think art therapy could be?
I think it's therapy related to art.
Yeah, spot on. Like just how it suggests, it's like this blend of art with psychology, and just like how one would go to a psychotherapist, you'd also go
Yeah.
to an art therapist practicing using verbal therapy along with art. So it's kind of like a medium to express, and there's no like set way. It could be absolutely any kind of art medium.
Great. Art can express emotions that words cannot. And I want you to tell us that in your practice, when artwork spoke louder than any therapy session could.
Yeah, I think there's so many examples, but one that really comes to mind is I work with a lot of gender-based violence survivors, and I'm thinking about this mother who's a mother of three, and so she's there. She's already navigating like the trauma from the abuse, and she recently, like the time she came, she recently also lost her youngest child to SIDS, which is the sudden infant death syndrome, which is essentially like unexplained death. And
Yeah.
so she was kind of processing that grief, right? And with that, she came in, but she was like, okay, I'm here, but she wasn't ready to talk about it. And it wasn't until about probably 3 months or so where she was just talking about her past week. She was like kind of doodling a little bit, and she gravitated towards the red and blue. And she started creating, just doodling random stuff. And
Yeah.
in that moment, after she completed, she noticed it. I also noticed something, but in the sessions, I let the client speak because mine can have my own biases. And she looked at her art and she was just like, "This looks like the rhythm of a heartbeat," because just the way like the patterns and the rhythm was of the doodle that she created. And I was so subconscious that she was like, that's it kind of created this portal to talk about that child. And it was just such a beautiful, powerful moment that I don't think it would have been possible if someone just straight up asks her, or like, she even talks about it. It came naturally from the art.
So tell us, how did you get into art therapy and how is it different from any other form of therapy? How is it unique?
Yes. I think I get this a lot. With art therapy specifically, it's art itself is a form of expression generally, right? Like apart from therapy. But with
Yeah.
therapy, it's like this modality that it combines and elevates the whole practice because it's this holistic approach. It's this idea that sometimes words aren't enough, right? Like you shared. Words can
Yeah.
be a little limited sometimes, right? Like with the language barrier, or even just generally, like
Yeah.
some emotions. cannot be expressed. So with art, it's like it doesn't have these physical constraints. It's like different mediums, different materials,
Mhm.
and it opens up these different areas that the subconscious, you're like, oh, wait, I didn't even realize. And again, you don't have to be an artist to do it. Like, that's something
Correct.
that people tend to ask. But it's more of like, okay, like, you know what, we'll use this to elevate the practice and connection in the space.
And do you think that art therapy is mostly related to painting and art, as in like the actual art, or art is quite diverse in terms of dance therapy, music therapy, because all of them are also forms of art?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So there are some practitioners who are like licensed in music therapy, dance therapy. For me, I'm licensed in art therapy. And so
Yeah.
for me, I would use all the art mediums. Like I may use a little bit of like music here and there, but just to add to the art. So with art, it would be clay, paint, drawing, um, sometimes a little bit of play with art, narrative making, essentially any medium that you can think of. It doesn't have to be constrained, like contained into like a canvas or a paper. It could be absolutely anything, and it's more about what the client needs, what the client would like to use.
No, that's amazing. And tell us, what is the main age group that comes to you largely?
So I've actually worked a little bit everywhere. I wanted to first test out and see the population. I had initially started with like kids in hospital setting, using like medical art therapy. Then later gravitated to children's and families, and currently working with adults and adolescents, adults with like gender-based violence survivors, and teenagers and adolescents that have just like the general anxiety, depression, stress related needs.
Wow, I think that's really fascinating because, as far as I'm aware, children in general, when they go to a counselor and they're seeking counseling, they are given a form of art to express themselves because kids might not have the vocabulary or the tools to explain what they're really feeling. So I know that art is taken as a great medium to express how they're feeling through whatever mediums, like you explained, to show how they're feeling at home or they're feeling in school. So if they can actually seek therapy with art itself and not speak to a counselor and feel like they're in a room, I think that's a great dimension to therapy. And I think it's very impressive you're doing this. So tell us, how did you manage to spread awareness? How did you put it out there? And how popular is this form of therapy?
Yeah, I think a couple of different things, right? Like in terms of like popularity, I think it's still growing. Like in the US right now, it's pretty much established here. I know it's growing widely and like pretty rapidly in India as well, and the rest of South Asia as well. Although I do feel like there's a lot of potential there, and I feel like
Yeah.
there's a big market and a big like way of kind of navigating that, right? I think it's also a lot more less not stereotypical, but more of like less of a stigma to
Yeah.
kind of explore art therapy than direct talk therapy. It can be a little daunting, when people are like, oh, I'm like, anyway, mental health has this big taboo. And then when you
Yeah.
speak about it, it's like, oh, wait, like, can I go? Can I not? But with art therapy, there are different ways that people are getting more comfortable, I think, with it, where it's like, oh, I'm using art. And like you shared that example of like a child, right? It's easier. It's a way that they feel like, okay, I know how to do this. I can control that setting.
Also, I think, like you said very correctly, it's daunting to speak to somebody, especially when it's something that you're not used to or something you're not open to. And this can be a medium that can be very therapeutic without having to explain yourself and actually having to relive the trauma, because a lot of times it's reliving the trauma as well when you're telling somebody about your trauma you've been through. And I think this would save somebody from going through it again and living it up again. And also, it may save yourself from like rewriting the narrative? Because I also feel like sometimes, let's say you go through something in life, right? And it happened to you when you were
Mhm.
15, and now you're 25 and you're seeking therapy. When you repeat the story, when you're speaking to your practitioner, you might actually have added so many layers to it, because in 10 years, your brain has kind of like added stories to it, because we always remember something
Definitely.
far more impactful than it was. Because, with years, we add stories to our story. And I
Mhm.
think with a form like art therapy, it can be quite easy to actually let your subconscious work more than your conscious, if I'm getting that right.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Because it's like the two pieces, right? Because there could be like missing pieces in between,
Yeah.
just like how you shared.
Oh, amazing. So tell me, what do you think about some emotions that refuse to be put into words but flow so easily onto paper or a canvas?
Yeah, I think just like perhaps you may have heard this, like, if someone's experienced this stressful incident and they're like, I cannot tell you how I'm feeling, right? Like I just don't have the words to, like, that phrase tends to come because their body has held on to that stress. However, they
Yeah.
don't, like, neurologically, you can't put words to it, right? And I think that's just a very niche example, not niche, but specific example of how individuals may not be able to express it, but they're feeling it.
Yeah.
So with art, you'd be able to do it, right? Like, for example, if you're constrained into like feelings, but you can't verbalize it, just by even like moving your on a piece of paper, if you're just moving your hand with a paintbrush or a pen, and sometimes that allows you to kind of gain control. So even if you can't verbalize it, to show how you may feel that sense of pain or stress or any form, which kind of gives you that new portal to talk.
And in your practice, tell me, have you seen that certain colors or shapes repeatedly pop up when people are trying to explain grief or trauma?
Yeah, I would say that I definitely notice some patterns, but I wouldn't say they're universal, because there's some patterns that I might see more common than others, depending on like
Yeah.
grief and trauma. I'd look at intensity. I'd look at like the pressure of if they're using like a pen or brush, like, the pressure, or if they're using clay, like, the grip, the body language, but not necessarily it's the same every time, right? That because grief can mean different, like mourning is different in different cultures,
Yeah. For
whether it's
different
white
people. Yeah.
colors, white,
Yeah.
black, red. It really depends culture to culture. But I kind of put the question back at them, because I would definitely say that, oh, I noticed that, like, you've created this and there seems to be a repetition. Do you think this means anything? And kind of putting the question back at them. And so
Correct.
this one example is, I run these group therapies, a group therapy for clients that have experienced gender-based violence. And we create, like, it's these story cloths. So this story cloth is a piece of cloth where they're going to be sharing their narrative. It's the sense of empowerment. We teach them over a course of like 6 to 8 months stitching techniques, and, like, how to showcase their story. Of course, it's not just like, they start immediately because it's a lot, but we built onto it. And different people coming from different cultures, and culture is not just, your ethnicity. It's also the
Yeah.
environment you were brought up in, and
Absolutely.
um, the pe- the people you're around, right? And just noticing how different colors mean different things. There was um, this client from like South Asia, and she would use in terms of, and she would share that from, I think it was Southeast Asia, I think the Philippines. She'd use a lot of white to show that she's like, trying to look into the healing, the purity, the calming nature of, like, like, I know this has happened to me, but this is where I want to be. That instilling sense of hope. And then there was this other client who was born and raised in the U.S. for, I think, third generation, Latina. However, she was more like, she associated with like the American culture, and with, like, the black funerals, like black as a
Yeah.
color of
Yeah.
mourning. And a lot of her work was black. And I know you may have, or generally people hear and associate like grief with like grays and like darker shades. And here was
Darker
just really
shades.
nice to see, like, two different colors, right? And in that same sense of like, okay, we're both creating story clots. However, their use of different colors, the use of different shapes, but still kind of showcasing your own story.
Yeah, that's so true because even generally, without the therapy part of it in art or in colors or in terms of shapes, like different colors, people from different nationalities. For example,
Mhm.
a bride is supposed to be white in the Western culture, whereas in Indian culture, white is worn when somebody passes away. So we never let the bride wear white. It's just the same color and it has different meanings. So I'm sure that when
Yeah,
people are expressing emotions, then like the conditioning comes into place, what you've been conditioned to feel about colors. So for me, white is purity, but at the same time, white is not associated with like a bride or happiness or a happy moment. You don't wear white. Like you're celebrating, you have a massive milestone that you celebrate. Everybody will be like, oh, don't wear white, wear something colorful. Colorful means happiness. But whereas if you see in the Western culture, white is a sign of purity, a new step to a new life, and a wedding or a reception or whatever. So I guess culturally or societal conditioning already makes us have these preconceived notions about colors. So I guess when we're
mhm.
expressing it into therapy, it'll come through.
Definitely. I think it would come through for the most bit, but actually, you'd be surprised to see also sometimes it might be different associations based on, your past experience. Like generally, you'll be like, okay, yeah, I associate red with this and white with this. But just like, subconsciously, you'll notice that certain other colors come up based on that certain moment, which is really interesting to see, right? Like you wouldn't expect it. But it would just come up based on maybe the association of if I'm talking about grief. And this one client is like, I associate grief with purple because my granddad who I lost, he loved purple. So just something as simple as that
Oh,
is like the association.
yeah, I guess it can define your narrative. That's what I said. Like a lot of it comes from
Mm,
your conditioning. So her conditioning was seeing her granddad in that color.
exactly.
And I think can have a huge impact on how you perceive colors and shapes and things like that. And I guess it'll come out in your
100%.
therapeutic sessions. So do you think creating art can change the body's nervous system the same way meditation does?
100%. Like, I think that art in different ways has this really calming effect. One could, of course, be just generally when you're creating art, but the others that I notice is when there's like repetition, whether it's stitching, weaving, there's like this constant repetition of movement. And it could also
Yeah.
be like through brush strokes, right? And have you ever like knitted before, crocheted, or something
Yeah,
that's
I have.
constant?
Yeah.
Yeah. And just like that, right? Like it's because your mind and body is coming in tuned. So it's kind of like helping like the parasympathetic nervous system and settling that, right? Where it's increasing this calming effect of your body kind of going to tune, whether it's something even like swimming or exercising in this repeated manner. And that's something that I try to use depending on the client. So I tend to use this a lot when a client's maybe, like dysregulated in emotions
Yeah.
and feeling very anxious. And something that I use in a lot of the sessions is to calm the client down. I'd invite the client and ask, like, are you okay trying this exercise where we're going to continuously do a repeated motion? And something that I tend to like give the client, depending on who it is, would be constant stitching. So there is one client that absolutely loves stitching, but she knows that she associates that with anxiety. So the minute she's feeling like really anxious, we just have her box ready and she'll just grab it and she's like, yes, I'm on it. And as she's talking, it's like, if we're just talking, she'll be ruminating. Versus when she's stitching, she's actually sort of settling a nervous system down.
Yeah, that's really right. Because as a child, or actually a lot through my adolescence, I painted a lot and I drew a lot and I was really into art. But when I went into my graduate program for fashion, I struggled with stitching and sewing, and I found it absolutely terrifying. So every time there was a sewing class, I would not look forward to it. It was anxiety for me. So yeah, like you said, actually, different forms of art can have a different effect on our nervous system. And I actually experienced the two. Like, it was so different how I felt when I was painting and drawing compared to how I was sewing and stitching, and just was
Mm.
very different emotionally.
Yeah, and it's how you associate it, right? Like when one can be a little stressful, it's like, okay, what is your way to like soothe your body?
Yeah.
And one more thing that I give my clients, like just like a fun tip, is something that's accessible and easy. Like not everyone might have a like stitching kit handy. Is just something as simple as like it's I call it finger tracing, where you put your hand on a piece of paper, take a pen, pencil, and you're kind of going up and down with the pen and pencil,
Yeah.
like tracing your fingers. However, when you go up, you're inhaling, and when you go down, you're exhaling. So you're kind of regulating your breath work with it. And there's a lot of
Oh,
like
wow.
science and research with that, right? When you're trying to really consciously make that effort of inhaling and exhaling, but you're doing it with like that tactile experience.
Oh, that's amazing. I'm actually going to try that after we finish. So tell me, with survivors of gender based violence, what does art allow them to say, reclaim, or express? And how does that conversation not happen with words and happen through art?
Definitely. I think one thing that I notice with a lot of my clients, like firstly, like art is this idea to restore, right? Restore and regain that sense of choice. With all these
Yeah.
majority of gender based violence, a lot of things happen without their consent.
Correct.
Lack of choice, right? Lack of control in the situation. And we're using the
Yeah.
space of art to give them that sense of autonomy, control, that power that they can make that choice and decision. Like
Yeah.
something as small as like, you know what, today you decide what do you want to create? Or like, you know, like these are your options. Like this is a smaller example, but just thinking about, you know, like a client coming in and majority of the clients would be like when they come in this space, especially this population, they tend to like really talk a lot and they're just ruminating because they tend to talk and then they're sometimes they kind of re-traumatize themselves, right? Like when they're
Yeah.
telling the story without having this containment. So what we tend to do is
Yeah. That's
we
what I
give
said,
them
right?
that.
Like, people tend to relive.
Exactly, like you said, right? Like sometimes when you're sharing the story, you're when you just keep talking about it can be re-traumatizing to the client rather
Yeah.
than keeping
Yeah.
it in a safe space. So what art does is
Exactly.
we start small, right? We're trying to make it a little more comfortable, creating that safe environment where they know that okay,
Mhm.
this is what it is. How can we explore it in a way that doesn't feel alien or unsafe, right? And something that art does is letting you separate that of course you have experienced it, but we're creating that aesthetic distance. This is
Yeah.
not my body. This is where I'm putting it out, and this is my body. And through that, it's like even something as simple as that is helping them separate the two. So, this is just like
Correct.
a small example of how we use it in the general population.
And has there been any client that has come to you and felt like, it was life changing and they had been through gender violence, but 2 or 3 sessions with you and they felt like their life changed? Can you tell us about that?
So I'll tell you the story about this one client. She was in her mid 30s. She was married to someone she was seeing for about over 10 years. And so, of course, like this trust was built. And when she moved, she was from Bangladesh. When she moved here, she realized that, you know, like this guy has been deceiving her in different ways. And after like, you know, she really tried working and culturally, right? There's this expectation that women should work on it and, you know,
Yeah.
she'll get somewhere. She should just put in like, you know, let go of certain things. And that cultural understanding was kind of missing when she would speak to other people. And
Correct.
when I first connected with her, that's when, you know, like initially she's like, I'm so happy that, like, you know, you understand. I think it's also that sense of like cultural similarities, right? And
Yeah.
that sense that you understand what I'm going through. And creating that environment. And immediately she was like, tell me what I need to do. I'm open. And just that openness was also like, okay, this is your space. Like you tell me how you want to explore, but together we can do something. And she just started, she's this woman with a lot of ambition, a lot of hope. And she's like, I want to leave him, but I don't have the courage. And of course, it's like, I'm not going to be like, oh, you have to leave this person. I have to see where the client is and when she's going to be ready. And every time we'd build on it, because she's like, I want to build up and become a really strong, independent woman and a businesswoman. And every time we do that, she'd have these big goals. But then the next day, like, she's like, how do I get there? How do I work on it? And it was about kind of reminding her it's about those little steps in between. And there are two parts, right? Like one is the independence, the other is navigating that abusive,
Yeah.
toxic cycle because she was living with the partner. And at the end, like she kept working on it and she was really, every time she'd show up in session, she'd be very present. She'd work on different things and she'd create a plan to take back and she'd implement it. So every time she'd come, she'd be so open to exploring different mediums and learning more about herself each session with different mediums, different skill sets. And I think by the end of like our 1 year journey, she already kind of worked on like this little course that she had credentials in and towards starting her own thing. So just creating these little step milestones is so important when you create that trust with a client.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very, very important to create that trust and kind of create that equation, that energy with your client. So, have you seen people draw or paint their way out of silence into empowerment?
I think most of my sessions kind of start with that. Sometimes it could be silence based on just the shyness.
Yeah.
So this 8 year old who was one of my clients, whose mom was actually a survivor of gender based violence, witnessed a lot of like violence growing up. So he's this 8 year old, really chirpy but very like quiet, like has this giggle. And at first he'd come in, he'd want to just play games, and he'd do a little bit of art making, maybe like a little scribble on the corner. And every week he'd come, he'd do that same scribble. It gradually changed though. It changed to like a little
Wow.
smiley. And so we were like, okay, he's getting more comfortable. And we're like, okay,
Yeah.
sure. After the smiley, after a couple weeks, he started drawing stick figures. I was like, okay, this is going somewhere. Again, not pushing him because I was like, you do what you're comfortable, but those would start conversations. He'd love talking about his friends in school. And one day he just drew like the superhero and he was like, that's me. And I'm so strong. I can save anyone that needs help. And just that itself was like, okay, like, it started that conversation of like, he's not going to directly talk about like, his experience, but through this, it was just so empowering to see that like this boy who was really shy, really quiet, and through his art and even through like, storytelling and narratives, he was able to transition into kind of sharing his his desire to be there for his mom.
Oh, that's really sweet. I think a lot of children, growing up, I have a 9-year-old, so I can relate to this story in terms of how 7 to 9 year olds, or even 6 to 9 year olds or 10-year-olds have this fascination of being a superhero. And some kids are very expressive. Some kids are very,
Mhm.
vocal about how they feel, and they're very expressive in terms of
Yes.
saying what they want to be when they grow up. But then there's some kids who just don't. And then it's hard to read them. And then only, let's say, a parent can read them because every parent knows their child, but everyone around can't. And then there's confusion in identifying who they are and what they really want, and you kind of sometimes misunderstand them. So I think that's amazing. If have you ever thought of starting this in schools, so a lot of kids can actually express themselves where they are not able to because they feel bullied, they're shy, they come from homes of different environments, because kids have a lot going on as well. People only think like therapy is for adults, but there are children who come from broken homes. There are children who come from,
Yeah.
I don't know, violent homes. There are people who come from single parent homes. There are children who come from siblings being bullies. There are kids who come from, I don't know, gender-based discrimination. You're a boy, you're useless. Look at your sister, she's so amazing. You know what I mean? So they carry all of this when they come to
Yeah.
school or when they go to play areas. And have you ever thought of like incorporating this into a school schedule? Have you ever suggested this to anybody?
Yeah, that's actually my long-term goal, to create like little programs that I can implement and have in different schools, because we kind of use a similar system over here and in New York, and there are a lot of schools that have like art-based therapies, a part of the counseling program. And I know there's some like art therapists maybe in India, but I want to create like this program where I can implement and multiply and train staff to kind of
Yeah.
incorporate that in different places.
That would be amazing. I think that's a wonderful idea, and you should work on that program and kind of make it universal and across the different education boards, and they can take it on. From like the age of 4 or 5 going up to 10, because after 10, I think they do start to speak their mind. They do start to express themselves largely,
Yeah.
but I think
Yeah,
that period between 5 to 10 is kind of confusing for them, and not everyone's out there, not everyone's expressive. So that would be amazing.
exactly. Yeah, definitely.
So tell us the difference between art created in recovery versus art created in pain.
Yeah, I think that the first thing that comes to my mind for this is both physical and mental, right? If I'm thinking about physical pain, and I think both in pain and in recovery, both are equally important. In pain, it
Right.
might just be like, the raw nature of art that comes in. Maybe it's like, the pressure, the intensity, the chaos on the paper, right? Because you're really trying to use this art as a medium to express. But more than that,
Correct.
also explain to the other person that, hey, I'm in a lot of pain. I'm going to do whatever I can. Like, people might say it can be a form of distraction, but it can also be a form of
Yeah.
soothing, right? Like we discussed before about that rhythmic pattern, the repetition,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
also kind of a vessel of empowerment to process what is going on, and sometimes also regulate the nervous system. So that's the aspect of pain. In terms of recovery, of course, when you're comparing both the artworks, you'll see the difference. But in recovery, there's a lot more openness. There's a lot more hope, in a way where you're like, okay, I'm in this journey. These are my goals. And what do I hope to achieve? And that comes not just through art, but obviously it's a combination of the conversation, the narrative that's
Yeah.
built. And I think sometimes it's just so beautifully shown with through sculpture as well. Like a client that I was just thinking about when you asked me about pain versus recovery was
Yeah.
this client that had was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. It's this
Oh,
diagnosis that impacts your nervous system. So like muscle, like it impacts your muscle, nervous system, your whole like the muscle movements and joints. So sometimes you can see it physically as a disability. Sometimes you can't, and
can't.
this
Yeah.
individual can feel it in the body. And so it might be as simple as like, even not everyone would be using a walker, but there's certain symptoms
Yeah.
like that. So this client had come in again another group therapy in this hospital setting, and he used to come with his wife. And it was the sweetest sight ever, because they'd come in, there was a bit of a language barrier, but he was really like enthusiastic about art making.
Yeah.
And but you can always tell that he's in a lot of pain. So some days he wouldn't be able to like even hold the pencil, because it would really hurt him. So what we do is we use adaptive tools. And something we did was like we attached a ball to the pen, and so he just grip it like that and kind of create. So things like that, and it kind of allowed him to work on that, showcase the pain that he was feeling, but also give him that sense of hope in his journey.
Wow, that's so beautiful. I don't think I've ever heard of anything like that before. So it's very new for us, because I haven't really heard of art therapy in general
Mhm.
being practiced in India or in my environment, or my surrounding at least. I think that gives me an idea. I think when you're down to India next time, I think we should work out a workshop. We should do something together. I think
Definitely.
it'll really be, yeah, I think it'll be really cool. Do you believe some symbols are in art are universally human, beyond culture, language, or upbringing?
Yeah, I think there is a lot of research. Like, of course, every culture might have different meanings or the way they say it. But something that I notice a lot is circles, and maybe like mandalas as well, right? This concept of the circular pattern, it might
Yeah,
mean slightly different things, but at the end, it has this calming wholeness, this unity that you tend to see in different forms and shapes. And something that we also use it at the beginning when we're offering it to clients would be I would maybe cut out a circle on paper and give that to a client to draw something inside, because that creates that sense of safety, that kind of like, okay, I'm in a safe space, in a connected spiritual space.
correct. What you said about Mandela made me remember that before COVID hit, like these adult coloring books became really popular. The Mandela art books, where there'd be like really intricate drawings, and you had to color them with different colors, and people would
Yeah.
put pictures on their Instagram and their socials saying, this is what I was up to. And it became really a big phenomena. And I think it lasted about a year and a half. And I saw everyone going crazy, buying these elaborate, expensive books and like coloring each page. There were even themes like wildlife, and like gardens, and then there were like tea houses and things like that, each book. And I know that concept was really popular for 2 years, but I think from
Mhm.
2019 or 21 to 2021, if I'm not wrong. Can you tell me what was that and how it came about, and is that related to art therapy?
So that's something that I actually hear a lot, where they're like, "Is it similar?" And of course, that is definitely therapeutic, where this nature coloring, right? But the difference that, like, like we like to highlight, is that this art therapy would be with a licensed practitioner who is
Correct.
there in that environment, right? Like, you can of course do therapeutic art, which that is, but that would be
Yeah.
a difference that I would highlight between the two.
So it would be different, right? Because that's just
Yes,
yourself.
yes.
It's like journaling, the difference between journaling and actually
Exactly.
taking talk therapy. Yeah. Okay. Makes
Yes,
sense.
exactly.
So let's go
Yeah.
into chronic illness and the body. So tell me, when working with people navigating a chronic illness, how does art reconnect them to a body which they feel betrayed from?
Yeah. I think with chronic illness is something that they're navigating for a long time, and or will be navigating for a long time. And something that they feel is definitely that loss of identity, right? Like maybe like you described, a body has betrayed them, or body part. And it's this idea of them coming into terms with the new norm, the new normal. And through art, it's this lens with, different forms of, whether it's frustration, whether it's grief, right? Because they've lost this
Yeah.
original sense that they connected with. And it's this new identity that they're configuring. In both ways, I think that art allows them to give them that sort of tool to share, but also take ownership and showcase, right? Like similar to the multiple sclerosis example that I shared, that is a chronic illness. And with that as well, like, it reminds me of, this that same client who would sort of take on this idea that, like, these are my limitations. However, I want to use that and use art to showcase what I can do now. What is the best that I can do right now? And it's easier said than done, right? Like, if someone tells you, like, oh, look at the positive side, that's not going to work always. It has to come from within, where you change that narrative, you flip that cup
Yeah.
and say that,
Yeah.
okay, the glass is half full.
Correct. Do you feel like you've ever dealt with your own, could be mental, physical, any issues in your life through art therapy, or have you tried different therapies for yourself?
Yes, definitely. Like, I've explored like regular talk therapy, as well as a little bit of art therapy. Something that I used to explore was, I think maybe a lot of us may resonate to this idea of school and school stress and academic pressure, in terms of like cultural expectations, right? Like, okay, you have to do really well, like
Yeah.
top everything. And even if no one else is directly putting pressure, you tend to put on yourself. And I
Yeah.
used to feel and hold on to a lot of stress in my body, and thinking that it's normal, and, here and there, maybe even panic attacks. But again, thinking that, okay, if I'm not stressed, then I'm doing something wrong. And it wasn't
Yeah.
until I went into college, right, that I was thinking, and I was like, okay, this doesn't seem normal. Like, I'm sure there are ways. And I came across this professor who was speaking a lot about mindfulness. And that kind of led me to connect with my journey of like mindfulness therapy, and understanding that you don't have to do it that way, right? Like, of course, that comes, like, challenges will come at you all the time. It's about finding the
Correct.
tools that work for you to be able to like surpass those challenges.
I like you said that. It depends on the tools that you'd like to use, because what happens is we as human beings tend to generalize and put everything in a box. So if you have this, you must do this. If you have this, you must do this. But in the end, I
Yeah.
think every experience is individualistic, and every healing is, very individualistic. It depends on how we process, because how I process pain might be very different to how you process pain. And how I process recovery also may be very different to how anybody else processes recovery. So I think that's
Yeah.
that's very profound to say that in the end, it depends if that tool works for you. And it's great to know that this is a tool that has worked for so many across so many cultures and different ethnicities that I know that you work with. And
Yeah.
people should, get into finding out what it is, and if see if that this is something that might work for them, that if nothing else has. So this is something definitely
Mhm.
to explore. Has someone who has lost mobility or their general motor skills because of an accident or because of a mishap, have they ever come to you and created art with you and done therapy through that?
Yeah. Um, so it could be a part of like you said, like an accident or maybe another kind of illness. But there are moments where they're like, like of course there's stigma. Like I can't use, say, my hands. And there's this one case that I can think of where this person's there and they're like, okay, I'm here, I want to talk. And of course, you're not going to just dive in and be like, nope, create art if the client's not comfortable.
Yeah,
You meet them where they're at,
correct.
right? You're not going to force
Yeah,
them. And so with that, like, we're talking and kind of just going over different artworks and artists and kind of creating that, like setting them up for success, right? Where you don't want to set them up for failure, and showing different artworks and showing different sort of like art styles, because a lot of the art you see in the world is very like perfect and like like has to be really proper, but there's so much out there that is different, like Jackson Pollock, we used to use this
yeah,
like the splashing technique and would do it in different ways, different heights. And again, this client had injured their hands and so wasn't able to move or use it in that moment. And what we I tried doing was creating a way to kind of create that idea that, there's also other ways. So what we did was we took his cap and tied up a paintbrush to the top of the hat, and like we taped it, and we kind of did it together so it doesn't feel like, okay, what am I doing? This is weird. So the two of us did it on like both our sheets, and to show that, sometimes we should challenge other parts. And it just became like
correct.
this fun, easy, like no rules kind of exercise where it started like splattering the paint onto the sheet. Again, not using the hands, to show that there are other ways. And artists have also done it, shown art in different ways.
Correct. Wow, that's amazing. I think we limit ourselves, right? When we think we go through something, we always think we can't move beyond this. We limit ourselves. We think this is it. This is the boundary I've created, and now I'm
Yeah.
upset or my life can't move forward. And I think what you said is very right. If you can't use your hand, let's try something else. So it gives you the confidence to go back to using the body part you thought you can't use. That's a really, really
Yeah.
amazing story. Tell me, have you noticed art revealing identities? Have you noticed that people come in to do art therapy and really reveals their true identity, which they didn't even think existed?
All the time. Absolutely. I think this is one thing that all of us explore in different stages of life, but in one therapeutic journey as well. From a client starting to a client ending or transitioning, I would say that different identities are being unfolded, changed,
Yeah,
navigated, explored, and just kind of thinking about like specifically like when you're thinking about like sexual, cultural, gender identities, right? There's so much. There's so many moving pieces.
yeah,
There's so much
yeah,
of
yeah,
sometimes
there are.
different pieces that you're still figuring out, right? There's no right
Correct,
or wrong. And in different ages, it can be like you're still exploring, and there's so many factors influencing. So I think in the space of art therapy and therapy, it's like it's such an open space, but yet depending on what the client needs, really structured, they can explore it for whatever purpose. And thinking of like this teenage client that I had, and they were exploring their identity and trying to figure out, okay, like I don't know where I stand, and but I need to have an answer because everyone in my class has an answer. And it
Yeah.
was kind of like using that conversation, right? Like I'm not here to dictate like what the timelines are, but what makes you feel like you need to. And the client shared about feeling left out and saying that everyone has an answer and I don't. And, kind of lending into this idea that with art, and as we were talking, this client loved watercolors. And with
Yeah.
watercolors sometimes comes that fluidity, but also the lack of
Yeah.
control. So that was another thing that
Correct.
we were exploring there. And this client is like using watercolors and is trying to get this specific tone for a sunset. Again, we're talking about this other issue and like complex identity crises that they shared, but at the same time is trying to get this color and did not get the exact color that they tried. And
Wanted.
as
Yeah.
we're navigating the two, like in that session, they were like, wait, maybe I don't have to have the answer right now, even if other people have, because I have my own timeline. And it was just something that even I was not expecting in that session, but it was something that just
Wow.
came up, and it was just so interesting to see that shift. And so when you're in that session, you're just like, okay, I know this client will eventually come there, or that's my hope. But just to see that, by the end of that specific session, it just comes up as like a surprise for the both of us.
Wow. People, I would assume that if I saw a flyer and if I saw that it said art therapy with Tanvi Mehta, come, explore, blah, 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 I would probably be like, it's just going and drawing. Like generally people have that preconceived notion, art therapy, I have to go and draw something. Firstly, everyone's in denial, nobody needs therapy. I have no problems in my life, no one has any problems in their life. Secondly, you don't need therapy. Thirdly, art is not really my jam. So, how do you think we can, in a nutshell, explain why art therapy and not anything else?
I think art therapy holds that space to be able to let you know that, again, art therapy is very different from commercial art. You don't have to be an artist, right? It's just sometimes if you don't want to talk, don't talk. Take whatever medium is calling to you. Like if I'm hosting a session, a workshop, I will have all the supplies. I'll be like, you know what? Don't want to do this? What are you in the mood for? Do you want to create something with food? Let's do that. Do you want to create something with like plants? Let's do that, right? Like pottery, anything that is calling to you that doesn't feel alien. Like I'm not here trying to be like, okay, you have to create this beautiful painting. If there's something that is remotely connected into your daily routine, let's bring that in. Because I'm not here to create something new. I want to take what you know and then use that as a form of expression to just get to know yourself better.
So, do you think that what you described is putting it down, kind of letting it go, right? So if someone's been through something, if you can't express yourself, you can pin it, you can draw it out, you can use any medium like you described. It'll help you let go. But does it help you find a way forward? So there are three parts of when something goes wrong with us, right? One is processing it, one is letting it go, and one is what is the way forward. The three parts to recovery or to getting over something. Um, do you think art therapy can help through all three, or do you think it is first is processing it while you're doing the art, second is letting go? But then how do you is that when you do the talk therapy part, when people can understand the what is the way to recovery then?
Yeah, I would say, like you said, it's the three parts, and people come at different stages, right?
Yeah,
However, whatever stage they come to, it will be a combination of both art and talk. So, for example, if they're coming in like, okay, I'm still exploring what problems I'm facing, that's where we
correct.
talk about, and that's where I meet them. Some is like, okay, I know this has happened. I don't want to talk about it. That's okay. During the initial sessions, I do an intake to understand levels, to understand like symptoms, like, just the psychological impact. That's
Yeah.
just more or less for my information and to start. And then after that, when we're doing the sessions, if they're like, okay, I want problem solving, we work on that, right? Together, we work on the journey till the end. Like, there's no set stone that, okay, this is the right path. Like, some people might just want to do the first part, some people want to do the whole thing. But at the end, the goal is to accept it and use that sort of space to how can you move forward? What is your solution for this? Because everything's not meant to be fixed. It's just about adapting to the change
Yeah, it
or the
is.
new.
It is. So I want to ask you about a very popular artist that I'm very very fond of, Vincent Van Gogh. Now he apparently had depression, he apparently had bipolar, he apparently had psychosis and other mental health disorders. Now his
Mhm.
paintings are phenomenal. They are world known and I think accepted and celebrated by every culture possible. So how do you think you perceive it as an art therapist? Because I'm sure art was therapy for him. Assuming.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. I think it's such a strong form of expression that he's used, right? Whether it's showcasing his pain, showcasing his idea of what's going on in his mind, right? Like, for someone else might not be able to understand, but through his art, it was so powerful that he is now like a global, globally known artist, right? Whether with his
Yeah.
strong mediums, his story, like his story has been so powerfully explained through each and every artwork of his. I think for Vincent van Gogh, like a piece that stood out to me, personally would be The Starry Night. I think there's so much of, especially his style of art,
Yeah.
there's so much of like swirls, and that's something that I notice in like just generally like we were speaking about universal themes, that there's something about
Yeah.
that, right? This idea of repetition and this idea of like, his possibly his mind. Again, this is me just assuming and thinking based on the readings. But there's something over there where he's trying to explain what he's feeling. This idea of feeling either like, in this open space or the hope that I want to be there, right? And I think Starry Night is absolutely one of my favorites, like whether you see it in postcards, paintings, museums. But it's something that just creates that sense of freeing nature, but also reflecting possibly what he's navigated in his life.
Yeah, when you're saying that, I don't think I've ever looked at it like that because I've never looked at his painting depicting his frame of mind in terms of therapy. But if he really did express every painting through therapeutic form, I would see those circles, for example, as being stuck in a loop. Like, you know how everyone interprets
Mhm.
it differently, right? Because you're
Yeah,
in this,
yeah.
so you see it differently. But this is what comes to mind. I don't know if I'm right, but it feels like he's stuck in a loop, like everything's a loop. And because I've read so much about him being somebody who had yeah, bipolar disorder, and it was severe, and even his psychosis was
Mhm.
severe, he probably just felt like he was stuck somewhere and he wasn't able to get out. Does
Yeah,
that make sense?
exactly, and 100%, because that's how he was feeling, right? Like trapped that he can't express. So he's trying to use this medium to share his story and share his, like, that idea of feeling stuck.
Can you think of another artist who is your favorite and you feel like they express art also because you can read into it now and say it came from therapy? Them not realizing they were in therapy, but for them it was therapy.
Yes, the first person that I think of is Frida Kahlo. Just also being like a feminist, this female artist, worldwide known. However, like her work has been so powerful, and not just like her storytelling and portraits, but also this idea of like this concept of her relationship with um, miscarriages and like not
Yeah,
being able like the fertility and showing
yeah,
that, right? Like she's really portrayed that in different artworks where she might not be able to
yeah,
conceive kids. However, like she had her like pets, animals as, like her family with, of course, a
yeah,
partner, and just showing her love, her pain, that form of expression, and also the adaptability, right? Where she's like, I can't move after her injury and I believe accident. She couldn't move, but she got something created where she can lay in bed and paint. And she had like this whole system. And that was also really interesting to see the adaptability that was created so she can continue to make art and express.
That is so amazing because I think today is the first time I'm going to start seeing all artists and their work as some form of therapy and some form of I don't know, a depiction of exactly what was going on in their mind, and it's a different perspective to have, and that's kind of cool. So before we end this session, tell me about a piece of art that a client made that has stayed with you long after the client left.
I think um, initially there used to be a lot that I just hold on to. But there is one really special one where this client in the session was just so beautifully vulnerable that it continued to touch my heart. And I use this as an example, even when I'm like sharing, um, when people ask me why I do the work I do. This example, like
Yeah,
this client, he was navigating this. Um, we spoke a little bit about accidents and how that impacts you. This client had just injured, got this really bad injury from this accident, and he was there with like just showed up consistently, and he was open to art making but not really sure of how to. And
yeah,
we work around trying different techniques, and that day we were exploring building this bridge. So building a bridge is something I use to kind of just understand different ways metaphorically and let the client speak from there. And we built it with clay and paint. And as he was creating, you could see that, like around the bridge, it was really like green, very luscious. And after he created the bridge, I noticed that the support system of the bridge, like the legs, was really weak. It was very
yeah,
thin, very weak, but the structure was beautiful. But it was like, if someone would move it a little bit, it could topple over. And
yeah,
he's just
with brick.
yeah.
Yeah,
And he's just explaining and sharing because I give the client the chance to like, okay, can you tell me more about what you've created? And he's talking and he
yeah,
notices this as well. And if he wouldn't have, I would have asked him, but he noticed. He's like, I love this bridge, I love the surrounding, but I don't know why I made the support weak. And that's kind of transcended to how he was feeling, that like his body was feeling that way. And although he had this hope and the luscious green around him for like where he wants to go,
yeah.
he could still feel that structure was imbalanced, right? And that's how he was able to kind of be present in that art making session, be vulnerable, but also take away from that he's acknowledging that, okay, this is where I'm at today.
And you still have that painting?
Yes, I have a photo of it because I wasn't like he told me, so usually I don't take artwork from the clients. But he was like, I want you to have a photo. And so he gave me the photo of it, but he took the sculpture with him because it was a sculpture.
Wow. Also, I think so many times, right? It's like reminders, like you would hold on to them not because of what you felt at that moment, also maybe a reminder of what might happen with you in your life, different circumstances where you can relate to what somebody felt, how they expressed it, and how it's been a huge learning for you.
Definitely.
Because we learn through people as well when we're counseling people, when we're speaking to people, you give therapy, you end up learning from
A
them
hundred
and you end
percent.
up applying it in your life. That how are you perceiving something that was incorrect because how they're seeing it is probably not right, or they can change it, and you learn to change your perspective accordingly as well.
100%. Like I think I learn with every climb, and even especially the children. I think I learned so much from kids in sessions because they have like such a
Yeah.
curious nature.
Yeah, and I think the purity of it, right? Because there's no malice. It's not mixed up. It's
Yes.
just how they feel.
Yeah.
It doesn't have, any agenda attached to
Mm-mm.
it, and they're not gonna like. It's not all shades of gray. It's literally black and white. I feel sad. I feel happy. I
Yeah.
love you. I don't love you. They have. It's very black and white, and I think that really changes how we see things. It helps us. I don't know, get more clarity, I guess, because they
Yeah.
have so much clarity on how they feel.
Yeah, definitely.
So, lastly, tell our listeners if you could ask everyone to create a piece of art for their own healing, what would it be that you would ask them to make?
Ooh, this is a tough one. I think one piece of art that I ask everyone to make is um, creating a safe space that they can go back into. So I'd invite them to make this visual representation of the safe space. So when I say safe space, what does it mean? It could be a place like maybe their childhood bedroom, maybe an imaginary place, maybe the beach, like a place that just makes them feel at ease. And you can do this in 2D, like on paper, 3D, like maybe get a shoebox and create, like, recreate that. um, I would also encourage to explore all senses. Like every time I give this to my clients, I'm always like, think about what you see in this place. What do you hear? What do you smell? What do you taste, maybe? And kind of create that, because this is something that's going to be with you. And even when you step out and
Yeah.
you need to connect with that safe space, because you've engaged with it already, you have it with you at all times. So at any point you're like, I just need to take a second to, like, breathe. You can also visualize this safe space.
So, Tanvi, before I finish, let me ask you a question that I ask all my guests. If you were to introduce yourself without mentioning your occupation, where you're from, your ethnicity, nationality, your hobbies, or your religion, which are all the superficial markers that we use day to day to describe ourselves, how would you describe yourself to me?
This is a tough one. um, So something that I'm told by my friends is that I'm a ball of sunshine or a ray of sunshine. Something I like to adapt to, but I think it would be a sunflower in a pot.
Amazing. That's beautiful. Amazing. So after this session ends, you and I are doing this exercise. We
Definitely.
need to do this exercise of safe space.
100%.
Amazing. Thank you, Tanvi, so much. It has been such a pleasure speaking with you. I'm so glad you could, between the time difference, try and take our time for us and really help us understand what art therapy is. It's a completely different medium to what we have here, and help people probably understand there's another dimension to therapy instead of talk therapy. Thank you so much. It was so lovely speaking with you.
It was such a pleasure and honor being here. Thank you for inviting me. I'm like, it was honestly really, really lovely connecting with you, and truly appreciate this opportunity.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tanvi Mehta, and for me, art is more than expression, it's therapy. I talk about how colors, shapes, and stories can help us heal in ways that sometimes words aren't enough. Subscribe and let's discover the art of healing.